Welcome to Getting Sketchy Live, brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com. And now, let's get sketchy.
Hello there, everyone. Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and welcome to Getting Sketchy. Now, if you're brand new here, you might be wondering, what is Getting Sketchy exactly? Well, Getting Sketchy is where myself or my good friend and fellow artist and art teacher, Ashley Hurst, tries to draw a subject in 45 minutes. Now, clearly, we can't get an entire drawing done in 45 minutes, but we can create a great sketch. And that's why we call it Getting Sketchy. So tonight, Ashley is actually going to be the one drawing live. So Ashley, how are you doing over there?
I'm doing well, Matt. Thanks for asking. I'm pretty excited to draw for you guys today. I've got a good image picked out. There's a lot going on in there, and we'll get as far into it as we can in the 45 minutes.
Yeah, and actually what Ashley's drawing is what some people consider to be the hardest subject in the world to draw. And I don't consider it to be the hardest subject in the world to draw. Ashley, do you consider it to be the hardest subject in the world to draw?
I don't think so. I'll go ahead and tell you there are hands in the video, or I'm sorry, in the image, and hands can be challenging because they're different every experience that we have with hands. They're constantly changing. But I think there's a little bit of forgiveness in the hands, maybe more so than a portrait, you know, a likeness, when you have to capture the likeness of a specific person. So hands are challenging, but hopefully I've got some tips today that will help you improve your hand drawings.
And that's why I don't think hands are the most difficult thing in the world to draw, because we kind of have a little bit of some formulas that will help you draw hands. But hands are just like anything else in the world. They're as challenging as you want to make them. So tonight it is going to be a challenge, but it should be fun. There's going to be 45 minutes on the clock in just a minute. But first of all, if you are watching this live on YouTube, I'd encourage you to interact with the chat box. You can ask us questions, you can make comments, and I'll be manning the chat box today. If you put your comment or question in capital letters, then I'll know that it's directed at us, and we'll address it here live for you. Now, it can be anything art related. It doesn't have to be anything doesn't have to be what we're doing tonight. But it does probably need to be art related. I think last week we got off topic talking about aliens.
We went a little astray last week. We're going to try to tighten it up some this week.
That stuff sure is fun to talk about, and we'll be glad to talk about it. I'm sure something crazy will come up tonight anyway. But if you do have a comment or question, capital letters, I won't take it as if you are yelling at me, of course. Is there anything else before we go into this?
I don't think so.
Oh, one thing I forgot. Of course, this is brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com, where we have a ton of drawing and painting lessons. We have a membership program over there, which includes a variety of drawing and painting courses and weekly live lessons. In fact, after this broadcast, we're going to be over at thevirtualinstructor.com, and I'll be drawing for an hour there. Our live lesson series are slower, and we create more developed, finished drawings and paintings. Of course, here on Getting Sketchy, it's pretty loose. We're creating a sketch. It's pretty quick, and it's kind of a different feel than our live lessons. There's also weekly critiques, which are part of the Members Minute, and a year-long curriculum for visual arts teachers. There's a link in the description below this video if you want to go check out our membership program. Everybody starts off with a free trial for a week. And then we have a 30-day money-back guarantee after that. So we want to make sure everybody's pretty happy. So we offer that for you. And if you want to check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free, just to see if you might like the program, there's also a link in the description below this video to check that out as well. All right. With all that being said, are you ready?
Yep. You ready? I'm going to go ahead and hit the lights.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and switch over to the main camera.
Now, don't start the timer yet. I want to talk about our image just a bit.
Okay. I won't set the timer yet.
The timer makes me nervous.
Let me make sure I've got the timer here, though. Oh, there it is. All right. We'll hide it. All right. Go for it.
All right. So as you can see on your screen, I'm going to be drawing a Music Man. It's really about the hands and the guitar, and I'm going to call the hands the big hand and the little hand. Instead of messing around with which one's right or left, is it your right or his right? We'll just call it the big hand and the small hand, the big hand being the one that's closer to us. Now, well, I have gone ahead. I have 2 images. One's propped up in front of me because I like to work with my reference vertical so that I can measure it as though I were working from life, or sight measuring. And that's when we use our pencil and our thumb to sort of capture the size of one part and then move that in our field of vision to measure the size of another part. But I want to describe how I'm doing that a little bit on a photograph. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this grainy photograph in. You can see the original composition was a little wider than what we have on your screen, just so we can see more of the drawing. But since our big hand is sort of our protagonist here, sort of the main character of our story, I'm going to start by measuring it and kind of checking all of the other parts of this drawing against that big hand. And so if we were sight measuring, we would not be so close, and we would use our pencil and our thumb to measure that part. But since we do have a photograph, I'll go ahead and lay my pencil right on it. Okay, but these methods, this technique for sight measuring, proportion, works in life as well as from a photograph. So I'm going to measure the big hand from the tip of the finger to the wrist. All right where the wrist sort of meets the forearm. And then one thing I've checked already is to how that compares against this other hand. And one thing that I discovered was the big hand was about the same size as the little hand and the arm the little hand is attached to. That's valuable information to know. I also noticed, anytime one part is exactly the size of another part, that's very helpful. I don't have to even think about fractions. And so the big hand again measured and compared to another part, it's the same size as this piece of the guitar, which I cannot name. So it's the guitar part that has the keys in there for tuning. Now, I can name some guitar parts, don't get me wrong. I know what frets are, what the fretboard is, and the nut and the bridge, but I cannot remember the name of this part. So we're going to call it the key area. How about that? So the big hand is the same width as the key area of our guitar. I'll draw some basic shapes, and then I'll pause a little bit and start comparing those shapes, the shapes that represent these parts. All right? And then, of course, I'll use the big hand to help me start the guitar as well. The guitar's width is much larger than a hand, but not in this picture because of the extreme foreshortening of the guitar. And that's part of what makes this a challenge. So that having been said, sometimes you may see my hand or my pencil move like this over the screen, and that's where I'm actually measuring from the vertical version of this this printout that's in front of me. All right.
Okay, real quick, Judith asked, what do you consider the hardest subject in the world to draw? And I'll answer that real quickly if you want to add to it. And I don't really think there are hard subjects or easy subjects. I just think there are subjects that are more time-consuming than others. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times people categorize those as harder or easier. But if you just, some subjects take a little bit more time. You got to slow down. You got to make sure proportions are correct, or make sure that different parts of that subject are in the right place. How do you feel about that?
I would agree with that. I think that's right on.
All right. And another question, TC says, what is the best paper to draw on? My pencils show a little shiny. Does paper matter?
Well, it sure does. And I guess your layering of pencils matter too. Graphite is a shiny medium. Some media or some paper has a tooth to it, which is, of course, the texture of the paper. And that tooth can reduce the shine a little bit simply because it's not a super smooth or flat surface.
Yeah, smoother papers typically shine a little bit more than rougher papers. And also, a lot of times people get a little too heavy with their graphite applications too quick, and that actually flattens whatever tooth or texture exists on the paper, and that increases the shine. So you want to preserve tooth as much as possible, even when you're working on a smoother surface like Bristol paper that has a vellum surface. That's a very smooth surface, but it does have a little bit of tooth or texture associated with it. And if you just are gentle with your layering of the graphite, then that reduces the shine.
All right, great. Thanks for that explanation, Matt. We'll see if this gets shiny. I don't think I'll get far enough into this drawing for it to become shiny. And before we start, I did want to point out that I've got two different weight pencils and two different brand pencils, actually. So I've got a 2H pencil that I'll start the drawing with, and then I'll switch to a 4B, which is pretty dark, maybe a little darker than an ebony pencil, if you're familiar with that. So, and then I've just got a regular pink rubber eraser and a sharpener, which I'll probably need because you can see from the width of the pencil that this is going to be a kind of a small drawing for the size of the parts that it's made from. Okay, and I understand that now. I believe that the key area of the guitar may be called just the head or the headstock. So thank you guys for that.
Okay, and I don't want to distract you from getting started, but sure. Laura says ox gall. Have you heard of that? Pros and cons, please. Are you familiar with the ox gall?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what that is either. Ernest says, Ashley, do you have a YouTube channel?
Yes, I do. It's Total Drawing, just Total Drawing. And it's a channel I use mostly for my students, so you'll find all kinds of videos there, and some sound like I'm talking directly to my class, and some to the greater world out there.
All right, I'm going to let you go ahead and get started.
All right.
And if you're ready for me to set the timer.
Set the timer. I'm starting with the 2H now. If you're following along, it doesn't matter what kind of pencil you're using. All right, I'm going to actually start with the thing that's pretty close to us, the main character. It's the hand, and it's kind of in the middle of our picture anyway. Now, what I draw may not look too much like a hand at first. It's going to look more like a polygon, an irregular polygon of some sort. I'm really drawing the hand shape as though it were, like a webbed foot. In my mind, I'm just trying to fill in the gaps between the fingers and establish a shape. Okay. So I'm thinking this spot would be the middle finger, if you're wondering, and this spot would be the tip of the index finger that's pressing the guitar strings down. And then this spot is where the thumb is barely visible over the guitar. And this is all I'm going to do right now and actually measure this against other parts. If I start drawing little fingers in here and find that this is too big or too small, I have to erase all that work I've done. All right, so I'll just kind of continue along a little bit. I know that the forearm here is smaller than the hand, so that's pretty helpful. Just because it's moving away from us in space.
And guys, in the chat box, there are a ton of things popping up here on the screen, and I'm going to do my best to get through all of the questions. Some of the questions are a little bit off topic, and that's fine. I don't want to deviate too much from the instruction that's going on, but Edie says, have you tried Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer line of colored pencils? If so, what do you think on them? I've never used that line of colored pencils. Have you, Ashley? Faber-Castell,
I don't believe I've used the Albrecht Dürer line of pencils, no. I'm sorry, I can't help you there.
Okay. Ernest says, Matt, have you ever used egg tempera? I've used tempera, but not traditional egg tempera, but Ashley has.
I have made egg. Actually, you have to make egg tempera. You can't buy it. So I can tell you the book that you need to buy if you want to make your own egg tempera the right way and do a great job at it. And it is The Painter's Handbook by Mark Gottsagen. The Painter's Handbook. It is, if you're a painter, you need The Painter's Handbook by Mark Gottsagen. I'll tell you that, and I refer to it all the time.
And Ashley also wrote a post and a tutorial on using egg tempera over at the Virtual Instructor. So if you go over there and just use the search function, type in egg tempera, and his post will come up. Let's see.
It's a little tricky to extract the yolk from the egg. It always takes me a couple of tries because you kind of get out of practice with that. Okay, so I'm looking for a shape now for the little hand, and I'm considering the gap between the hands and comparing that to the width of the little hand. We'll see. We'll see if it lands in the right place. Now, remember, the big hand to the wrist is the same as the little hand and its arm. So about right here is where sort of the middle of that crease in the elbow is. So maybe this is too big. We'll see. It's got part of the wrist included. The hand really stops right about there.
Okay, Veek writes, isn't Staedtler graphite media less shiny? And while Ashley's drawing, I'll go ahead and answer that. Really the only graphite pencil that I've seen that is shinier than others is a pencil called an ebony pencil, which is really a specialty pencil. It's kind of like the General's layout pencil. And the ebony pencil, I'm not really sure what type of graphite they use, but it is very dark, but also extremely shiny. And the graphite is also in those pencils is also very brittle.
To be so thick,
yeah,
you think it would hold up a little bit better.
The core is very thick, but in fact, I'm not sure if I removed it completely, but I added General's layout pencils to our ordering process when I was at Central Office.
Oh, that's right.
And shied away from the ebony pencils for that reason. may have taken the ebony pencils out completely.
Well, when I say ebony pencil, I guess I probably mean General's Layout pencil.
Yeah, there's a type of pencil called an ebony
that's
pencil.
probably a misnomer on my part.
And it is, they're in the silver encased pencils. The outside silver.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Prismacolor makes a version.
Oh, do they?
Right? An ebony pencil, I believe. They're actually kind of silver.
All right, Laura has clarified Oxgall is an additive for watercolor. So obviously, neither one of us have experience with that.
Yes, not yet. I'll work on that. All right. So we've got our little arm and little hand, and I think the hand may be big compared to the arm. So we'll see. Well, when I return to there, but as far as the whole hand and little hand and arm, I feel pretty good about that. Now I want to go ahead and keep working on my guitar a little bit. You can see I've laid in the curvy parts of the guitar. Are these called, for you musicians out there, are these round wavy parts called bouts? They may be called bouts, or that may just be on like big basses and cellos, and I'm not sure. So you maybe help us out in the chat there. Okay. Let's see. I believe that this guitar's body probably needs to be a little deeper in the composition. And I'm just looking at the gap between what may be a bout and where my pinky's going to go.
Okay, someone asked if you're married, and I'll go ahead and answer that. He is married, has two wonderful kids.
I got 3 wives and 2 kids. It's very busy. Very busy.
Did you say you have 3 wives?
It's hard to keep them from meeting each other. It's a small town. Just kidding.
Actually, just not have multiple
No,
wives.
that's a joke from the Three Stooges, which is a 90-year-old comedy troupe. I'm sure you may know who they are. I'm a big fan of the Three Stooges. Yeah, and everything they say is silliness. Okay, let's see. Now, I want to point out, while Matt was talking, I was working on these 2 shapes for a little while. These are open or empty shapes, or negative shapes. And I'm a big believer in looking at what's not there to help me draw what is there. So if I can concentrate and get this shape kind of close, then I've maybe the arm's not perfect, maybe the guitar's not perfect, but the relationship is similar because this shape actually includes both of those 2 parts.
Very good. Very good advice there. Someone also asked, are you Matthew McConaughey? You bet I am.
I've been asked that many times, many times. I get older, and I just keep getting older. And in fact, I am a big fan of Matthew McConaughey. I'm pretty critical of actors, but I like him. He's good.
He is pretty good, isn't he?
It's just his easy way of talking.
He's good in the movies. He doesn't need to be in the commercials. So.
Oh, maybe not. Yeah, no, you're talking about those car commercials from a couple of years ago. I kind of tell you, when they would come on, it's like I would slow down and I would just stop moving and watch. They were so weird. I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. All right. Now, the head of our guitar is going to be the same as our big hand and the wrist. So it's going to take us right to the edge of our picture plane, very close to it. So something's gone right here. I guess I got lucky there. I was worried I was going to have to fudge my picture plane over a little bit. But
I don't think it's luck. I think the way you're laying this drawing out it's very beneficial for people to see because a lot of beginners, they'll look at an image like this and just be completely overwhelmed.
And start to carefully draw around all the contours.
Yeah, they'll start with the contour lines, and
No.
The chances of that working out
Pretty slim.
Perfectly are pretty slim to none.
I like to now this is like an academic way to draw. This is the way we're trained to draw in schools. We've got all these straight lines and basic shapes that will gradually turn into complex shapes and gradually turn into forms. Mm-hmm. But it's so I like to. I guess there's a lot of ways to draw, but this is a great way to draw. But I like to think of it as sneaking up on our subject. It kind of develops out of a nebula. So. We'll see how close we sneak up on this one. All right, so there's some monkey business going on here on the head of the guitar that's a little complicated. And so I'm going to start out just by drawing what is this, a trapezoid? Kind of a distorted trapezoid?
Yeah, I think that's
Looks
trapezoid.
like a razor blade shape, kind of, instead of all that curvy stuff in there. And then, we'll try to get to that curvy stuff if we can. I think we can. But like I said, if I draw all that wavy, curvy stuff in here early and have to move this part, I'm going to be sorely disappointed. Oh, look, we've got some three-dimensionality starting to happen there. That's exciting. All right,
This image is great too because it's got foreshortening in it. As well.
Yeah, it's foreshortening and hands. What more could you ask for a challenge, right?
And a guitar.
Drawing and a guitar. Oh my gosh!
Guitars are. Got
Now
a lot of
I
stuff
have a
going on.
guitar in my regular classroom. I don't mind telling you. So this is something that we draw a lot because it is hard, and everybody loves guitars because everybody loves music. So don't get too many complaints, even though it's challenging.
All right. Go ahead.
Well, I think I'm going to get in this hand now, or maybe I need to finish laying out some marks for the body real quick, but I'm anxious to start carving out some empty shapes out of this hand. So let me just throw, our fella does have a nice, easy way of standing, a little gesture. In fact, I probably should have drawn his gesture because it kind of goes like this. He's got a tilt to his body. So that's something I noticed. Maybe should have mentioned earlier.
But you're still getting a feeling of movement in there anyway. Alana asked, do you use masking fluid with watercolors? I was watching your lighthouse line and wash video today and noted that you didn't use any while doing the sky. And yeah, for that particular image, it wasn't necessary to use masking fluid. You could just, avoid the areas where you wanted clouds to be. I do use masking fluid on occasion if I need to mask out an area. So if for example, with the recent series with the watercolor pencil bird for the live lesson series, I drew the bird and then I put masking fluid over the bird and painted the background a solid color with watercolor. And that protected the bird, or at least the drawing of the bird until I was ready to address it. But it allowed me to create a solid background using a wash of watercolor. So I use masking fluid when it's appropriate to use masking fluid, or when I feel like I definitely need to use it. But if I can just paint around something, then I'm not going to use masking fluid for that. Hopefully that helps.
Well, I do like the masking fluid. It takes out the a little bit of the danger of having to be so careful. Okay, so what you can see is I got a triangle here, and this is I'm just trying to judge the shape between these fingers. The fingers don't have any character, the tips aren't rounded. There's no fingernails, but hopefully that'll come later. Okay, so we're going to get our tiny, tiny little index finger tip on here. We can see it's under a lot of pressure. The tip of it's pretty flat. Now, I'll go ahead and tell you, this drawing would probably be a little easier if it was larger, instead of just being 5 inches tall, because we've got a pretty small hand here. I mean, the hand's not much bigger than my whole thumb. So getting into the details is going to be challenging. And if my lines are just a little bit off a millimeter or two, it could actually really affect our perception of the proportion. Ooh, look at that little negative shape in there. That one's, I don't know if it's in the right place, but I sure hope it is. I'd like to leave it there.
Okay, Melody says, monkey business, is that an art term? Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, definitely. What pencil grade is good for shading?
Well, I like what I'm using today, which is a variety, and there's a big gap between these two. So for shading, I plan to use a 4B or maybe a 3B is good too. Anything around that range is what I prefer. And we'll probably be switching to well, I don't know how soon. I've got 31 minutes left. It feels like I got a lot to do. So, and this may be just a line drawing when we're done. We'll see.
Well, there's a lot going on in there. And, that I think some of the most time-consuming parts of these sketches that we do as part of Getting Sketchy are the initial laydown.
That's true. On that Volkswagen Bug I drew, I shaded it in 10 minutes.
Yeah,
it took 35 minutes to get the proportions right.
Right. So, I mean, this is important. This is very important for people to see and understand that this part of the process needs to be slow.
And actually, I feel like I'm drawing like lightning right now. I don't know how it feels out there to you. It's not like taking a photograph, but you can only go as fast as the subject will allow.
And the piggyback on what pencil grade is good for shading, it's going to really be different for everyone. And it also is going to depend on the surface that you're working on. Some applications on certain surfaces, a graphite pencil, let's maybe say a 2B, might look lighter than it does on another surface.
Oh, that's true.
So
So you can't just settle on a weight and say that's the one for me. It's dependent on your surface as well. That's
and then value, which is what you're when you're shading, you're actually developing the value within the scene. Value is relative. So we understand values based on the values around them. So a darker value is going to appear darker if it's next to a lighter value. So that's also something to consider. Some people also put heavier pressure on the pencil compared to other people. So you can't really say there's one pencil that is perfect for shading. You just kind of have to experiment and find out what pencil is best for you for shading.
Okay. I'm going to mess around in this area a little bit. Looks like I might be moving some parts down a little bit.
Okay, question we have. Would you say this form following shape process is a natural progression from grid drawing, or are both equally valid?
They're both equally valid and not really that related, I would say. I mean, when I draw with a grid, I still draw flatter shapes. I don't shade as I go, but some people do. Some people will actually work and kind of shade as they go, adding the contours and the shading in at a time because they know they're not going to have a proportion problem. They've already sort of addressed that by simply choosing to use a grid.
Yeah, the grid technique is basically the same thing Ashley's doing, just small drawings.
Yeah, you're still judging proportion, just in teeny little blocks and with a smaller collection of shapes.
In fact, in the most recent course, Realistic Pencil Drawing, I named one of the lessons in there 77 drawings because the grid was broken down into 11 inches by 7 inches, which equaled 77 little 1 inch by 1 inch drawings.
That's a great way to look at it, I think. All right, so I had to move my fretboard down and had to move my index finger down a little bit. There must have been an issue with the proportions in there, and I don't really care to go back and find where or why. I'm just going to keep moving. Sometimes our drawings, when we find a little problem, and you discover what maybe the more accurate proportions ought to be, sometimes sort of a compromise between what you drew and what you should have drawn is close enough. And so that's what I'm kind of going for, a compromise from what I see and what I had initially drawn. All right. I guess we'll go ahead and finish carving out these fingers and then move over to the other hand a little bit. And I want to get up in here and draw a little bit of the detail up in here because this is the head of the guitar is the closest part to us.
Okay, Peter asks, is the reference photo available online? It is. This image comes from Pixabay. It has been edited. It's been cropped down, and the color has been removed to make it just black and white. And I'll remind you that I will post a lesson that corresponds with this. So basically a written explanation of what Ashley's doing in this particular lesson, along with the video on the website sometime within the next week. So you can head over to the virtual instructor and have that photo reference, and also have the video there all together with a written explanation. I just published last week's Getting Sketchy today. So last week's lesson's there if you want to check that out as well.
Okay, so I like to pretend that I tie strings to things and pull them sideways or down. And so I was trying to figure out exactly where this thumb goes. So, in my mind, I tied a little string to the tip of this ring finger, and pulled it straight across. They're pretty even with each other. So I'm a big believer in using what you've drawn to find what you haven't drawn. If you're thinking about what you've already drawn and how that relates to where you're going, then you'll capture that relationship and hopefully not have to change much or thing.
Very good, very good. All right. Molly asks, how do you feel about layering with just one pencil, a good drafting mechanical pencil, instead of using the H and B series pencils?
I think that's fine. I think that's good. I don't always draw with multiple pencils, and so far I still have it. I'm still using this 2H pencil. We'll try to get to the other pencil.
There are some great pencils out there.
You can, if you feel really good about your pressure control, your pressure sensitivity, you can make super light marks with a very dark pencil. So don't think you can't. Yeah,
I was going to say there are some great specialty pencils out there. like the Blackwing 602
Oh,
pencil.
yes.
That's
Yes.
going to give you a variety of values with just one pencil. And then there's the General's Layout pencil, which is also going to give you a good variety of values with just one pencil. I think the thing is you need to be able to get some of those dark values with one pencil. The light values are
that's
pretty
right.
easy to get, even with a soft pencil.
Now, I'm a really heavy-handed drawer. I don't know if you can tell because this is a 2H. And I got a lot of great feedback from one of our professors when I would just draw crazy dark from the very beginning. And so I guess I responded to that and stayed that way. So I draw pretty dark from the very beginning. So in my opinion, and then I sometimes have eraser marks that show, and that doesn't really bother me too much. If it's a type of drawing that needs to be super clean, then I'll just make a transfer of it sometimes and then continue shading.
Okay, a random question, but do you guys like drawing in public places? For me, it motivates me to draw because I tend to talk to people who are into art that see my work.
That's a good question. I guess I don't do that as much as I used to, but now that you're mentioning it, I do have really fond memories of drawing in public. But I guess I don't do it much anymore. It's kids. I got kids.
It's
they keep
kids
me
for
busy
me
all the
too.
time. I used to hang out in parks and fun stuff like that, living my life.
Used to do things.
I used to do things. Now I escape here once a week.
Yeah, and Ashley has 2, and I have 4. And the thought of sitting down in public and drawing seems very, very peaceful, and also something that I can't do right now.
But we'll get back to. I mean, where we live, we've actually got some wonderful public
definitely.
places that are they're like botanical artwork gardens, sort of their own, and it's not uncommon to see artists out there set up with a French easel. So I hope to be one of them one day. All right, let's see. I feel pretty good about where the hands are and proportions of my stuff. So I'm going to get up in here, and then I think with the time, I'm only halfway through. I've got a lot of time. I'll start shading in this area and sort of shade my way out, kind of skipping around. That way, wherever we finish in 45 minutes, it'll be most developed around our focal point. We'll create more emphasis with more rendering in this area, and then we'll have sort of a reverse vignette, where things kind of get dark and foggy around the edges. We may just be less developed around the edges. So that's my plan.
All right, someone asked, what do you think about using a proportional divider to do this drawing?
A proportional divider.
Are you familiar with what that is?
I don't think I am.
It's like a device that helps you to make measurements, basically.
Like a ruler?
Pretty sure.
I've
No,
actually
it's like
done this with a ruler
I think
before.
it almost looks like a compass a little bit.
Oh.
And
Does it come in a drafting set?
I don't think so.
Okay, I didn't know how technical it was.
And I've had lots of people ask about the proportional divider, and I
Yeah.
think that there are some people out there that use it frequently. I was never taught to use a proportional divider, but what I can gather is it's basically like a measuring tool,
I
and
gotcha.
it's shaped somewhat like a compass.
I don't have problems with art technology. You can use an opaque projector. Doesn't bother me. I won't call you a cheater. It's just another process to start creating an image.
Yeah, Ashley and I are on the same page about.
I draw this way because I like to. It's an intellectual activity. It's fun. Not because it's better than something else or makes me better than something else. It's a challenge and it's fun. So, but if you're an illustrator and you got deadlines, then you might use some drawing aids to help you match and make those deadlines. You're in that regard, you're kind of in competition with the other illustrators, and time is of the essence.
Yeah, an art director doesn't really care what tools you use to arrive at an image.
As long as it goes on the magazine cover and people buy it, or wherever it's going to end up.
But Ashley and I are really on the same page as far as using as many tools as you possibly can to arrive at a aesthetically successful image. So I know that there's people out there that really frown on using the grid technique, or really, really, really frown on using any type of transferring method, or using an opaque projector, for example. But really, it's all about the finished artifact.
I think it's beneficial to practice drawing this way, even if you're going to use those other things. I mean, you'll still,
definitely.
This little tricks you learn about, like the way, you want some of these creases to overlap the next segment. You might miss that if you're just tracing the very edges with an opaque projector. So it's good to practice drawing this way, even if you're going to use those other devices, just to really better maybe understand if you're creating form, that kind of thing, not just accurate edges.
And just to clarify a little bit more about the proportional divider, a proportional divider, from what I understand, allows you to make a measurement on like a photo reference and then take that measurement and proportionally find the same measurement on your drawing paper.
Oh.
So, for example, if your drawing is 16 by 20, or your drawing is 16 by 20, but your reference photo is 8 by 10, you could use the proportional divider to get a relationship between one area and another area, and then apply that same relationship to the larger surface, but still have the same proportions, the same proportional distance between those two.
So it kind of just helps you work out the math?
Pretty much.
A little bit?
Kind of helps you see the relationships.
All right.
And it seems like a proportional divider would be most beneficial when you are actually doing something that is proportional to something that you're working with. And I also think you can hold it up just like a pencil. I think it's kind of the same thing we do with the pencil measurements, just you have a little bit more accuracy there with the proportional divider.
Okay.
Like I said, this is not something that I use, and it's not something that Ashley uses. So
obviously not, because
we are
I didn't
speculating
know what it was
on its use.
But I'd like to check one out. Give it a shot. I mean, I'm a big fan of Vermeer and Albrecht Dürer, and they used new technologies for their day to help with them in their process.
All right. Someone is asking, in one of the previous members' minutes, which is something that we have as part of the membership program, you mentioned the 6 elements of atmospheric perspective. Could you explain them again? Well, it's actually 6 ways to create the illusion of space.
I did those 6 illustrations today for a student. Yeah, it's funny.
Obviously,
you're talking about it.
The first one is size. Objects that are larger are going to appear closer to the viewer. There's overlapping. Objects that overlap other objects are going to look closer.
Like this hand overlaps the guitar.
Exactly.
So if you can say it's in front of the guitar, you're creating space.
Right. Objects that are lower down on the picture plane often appear closer to the viewer. The only exception is if something's floating.
Or you're like on a high bluff looking down at the top of the hawk that Matt drew last week.
Right. Well, the exception in this image is the head of the guitar. The head of the guitar is higher up on the picture plane.
That's
but
an
closer
exception.
to
It's
the viewer.
floating out there in space. But look at the furniture in the room you're in right now. Look at the legs of all the furniture. The legs that are higher are farther away.
Right. Detail is another way to create the illusion of space. Objects that are closer to the viewer are more detailed, obviously, than objects that are further away. Color and value are another way. Objects that are further away are typically cooler in color temperature and lighter in value. And objects that are closer to the viewer are usually warmer in color temperature and also have higher contrast in value. So you're typically going to see darker values in those locations. And then the last one, of course, is linear perspective. That's another way to create the illusion of space. Atmospheric perspective basically deals with adjusting the color temperature and the value within the scene. So it's actually just one of the ways to create the illusion of space. So hopefully that helps. Mm-hmm. I think I said all 6.
I think so. We haven't ever used linear perspective on Gettin Sketchy, but you can.
You can, and maybe the reason we haven't done that is because
creating from their imagination.
There's like a bajillion lessons on the website on perspective, 1 point, 2 point, 3 point perspective. And that will answer, someone is asking, can you give some tips on perspective? Yeah, if you want to, head over to thevirtualinstructor.com, click on lessons and then drawing, and then go to drawing concepts. And there you will find a section on perspective, and there's probably like 7 or 8 videos on perspective, so you can learn everything you want to know about perspective there.
I love linear perspective myself, so I'll talk linear perspective all day. Okay. Oh, I got a guitar strap in there. Got almost all the hard edges in. I have switched to the 4B pencil. Just to encourage myself. Maybe to get a little farther into this. All right. Now, the lighting in here is pretty much from above. So we've got light on the top edge of the guitarist's head. We've got some shiny spots on the parts of the guitar that face upward. I guess the light's from above and from the left because we've got a highlight along this arm over here. And then we can see that the top of the big hand is quite a bit lighter than the bottom of the big hand. So I guess the light's kind of coming from this angle. And I'm just going to kind of pick a darkish area, maybe this area down here on the shirt, and start in there.
And someone's asking how to find a style. I feel like the way you find your own style is just by drawing and painting naturally, and eventually it'll come out. I think if you try to force a style, or try to copy someone else's style. Trying to copy somebody else's style is a great way to learn someone's technique, but it really shouldn't be the way that you go about finding your own style. I think just being true to yourself and doing what feels naturally to you when you're really trying your best, that's where your style is going to come from. It's kind of like handwriting. If you're trying to write the best letters that you can, or you're trying to write the best cursive that you can, that's your handwriting. And I think that's the same thing for art.
Now you can make choices. It's kind of like what do you call it in music, where the choice of instruments, it does sort of cast a filter over the sound of the music. So you can influence the look of your artwork with your media choices.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And that can be part of your style. That's a selection. But then the rest of it's just going to come right out of your hand.
Right. But a lot of that is also going to be natural too, because people tend to choose things that they feel naturally drawn to.
That's true. Feel comfortable with.
And I think the reason why a lot of people struggle with their own style or finding their own style is because they're trying too hard. They're trying to force a style to happen, or they're doing something that might feel a little bit unnatural to them.
Oh, Matt, the first paying job I got out of college was to do some copy art of Van Gogh and Picasso. And I thought, this is going to be so easy. It's going to be so easy. And it was not, because I was trying to copy the way they make marks, not their drawing. That wasn't too challenging, especially the Picasso is 3 musicians, just a bunch of geometric type shapes. But to make my paint look like his paint, and that's part of the style, just the way your hand is working. It was so hard, and I'll never do it again.
I bet you learned a lot about mixing colors.
Yeah, that's true. I did. And of course, the Van Gogh that I did a copy of was Starry Night, and they both came out well. But the mark making of Van Gogh's, his mark making is so specific and particular. It's little dash marks.
Oh yeah.
So it was a little bit challenging to try to remain in that style and not just paint the way that I was used to painting. Okay, so I'm looking for some darker patches in the arm and maybe across some of these fingers in here. I'm going to skip around a little bit and just try to keep my eye on the clock and bring it together wherever I've shaded near the end.
Here's an interesting question. Is drawing realism basically the opposite of style, or kind of a neutral style?
I don't think so, because if Matt and I draw a realistic image, they don't come out the same.
Exactly.
So I would have to say no.
Yeah, I think everybody puts their own
That's a good question.
mark on their drawings and paintings.
I know what you mean, though, because we use the word stylized when we're talking about slightly changing our subject.
Exactly.
Which is stylization is really like, in my mind, it's the first step towards abstraction. So we're really using that word in 2 ways right now, referring to 2 different things. Well, stylization is not realistic. It's been changed from reality, like cartoons.
And that's actually a form of abstraction, exactly like you said, yeah. Let's see here.
There's a cartoon called, I think it's called Inside Out. And the illustrators, whoever was responsible for writing and producing that cartoon, it's a movie, they have a 1.5-minute segment in there where the cartoons move through the different stages of abstraction. And it is so funny for artists.
I haven't seen that. I'll have to.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to use that clip in my own classroom because it explains in like a minute and a half what I talk about for hours sometimes and nobody gets.
Very good.
And so it's I would check if you haven't seen that or if you know what I'm talking about. It's really cool. Of course, they start out as cartoons. They're already stylized, but then they become more and more abstract until they're flat shapes and there is no depth. It's hilarious. So, all right. Just kind of creating a value range on the guitar, and then I'll use that to apply to the arms and hands.
And you can see how quickly he's adding the shading. It's going to be a quick process, I feel like. And also the directional strokes that he's making here are flowing over the plane of each one of the objects that he's shading too, which that's not only adding value, but it's also helping to communicate the form of those objects as well.
And I'm planning to do that for the arm. You can see that the dark strokes on the arm are going this way. The medium strokes will be more vertical. And then at the top of the arm, the strokes that are there will change in another direction entirely. So we'll actually have roundness to the strokes when they come together. We mentioned this, I think, maybe last week or the week before. We described cross-contour shading. So I have a chance to do it myself today.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of repeating. But that's okay, because these are concepts that you use in virtually every drawing and painting that you create. So they're important to repeat here. All right, Ernest says not everyone sees an object the same way. Would that be true? Absolutely.
Yeah.
We all see things a little bit differently. I think...
Especially colors, I think.
Yeah.
I've got a theory that we don't all see colors the same way.
Wouldn't that be strange if red wasn't your red?
Maybe just a little different, yeah. But when we both look at it, we've both learned to call our experience red. The experience that's happening in our brain, really.
But I think more accurately, maybe not everyone sees the same shapes that make up an object.
That's good.
So when you're drawing, I might see a certain number of shapes, and Ashley might draw the same subject and see different shapes. We might
or just choose different ones.
Right. And we might arrive at a drawing that looks pretty similar to each other, but we just arrived at it differently.
Yeah, that's a good point. I might use a trapezoid like I did in the head, and Matt might have just made it a rectangle for the whole thing, and then we both went from there, and that would have been okay.
Yeah, I probably would have made that a rectangle. But the shape of that, all of the shapes, everything looks very, very accurate in your drawing.
Oh, thanks. And, I would probably spend more time refining the contours if this was going to be like, less of a sketch. And when I think of these types of sketches that we're doing here, these are the kind of sketches that I do before I make paintings. It really helps me, especially if it's, a color subject. I want to do like a gray version sometimes before I actually paint in color. I know it seems like a lot of work, but it's pretty normal. The old masters usually drew what they were going to paint before they would paint it, sometimes multiple times. John Singer Sargent did that. He's not that old of a master, but he's not alive, and he was a master.
So you have a suggested time remaining of 7 minutes.
All right. Well, I'll just kind of think I'll work on this arm for a little while. We may have to cancel Matt's next show because I'm going to have to keep going with this. I'm going to postpone that. So in 2 weeks, I'll be drawing the Music Man holding a guitar. I'm kidding.
Now you can really see those directional strokes there, how they're helping to define the form of the arm.
Go back in there and try to soften them, or maybe use a stump or something like that. This might be a candidate for that type of an application eventually. Boy, this 4B pencil feels so soft after having drawn so long with the H pencil. So this finger here is high contrast. It's got quite a bit of darkness, but a nice light.
And I think a lot of beginners have trouble making some of those dark values, or really forcing themselves to make some of those tones as dark as they need to be. Because you can see right now, it feels a little unnatural, but once all the other values are in place, it makes sense.
When they're right, when they finally melt together with the midtones. But yeah, those first dark marks always feel a little bit out of place, disconnected. Okay. Of course, working on the arm and the guitar, I need to work around them a little bit just so they show up a little bit better. You know, I want the light on the arm to be apparent, and it's not with all this white space.
So you're purposely making that space in between the guitar and the arm a little bit darker.
A little bit, right. The shirt is so similar in value to the guitar and the arm that I thought that would be something good as far as an adjustment to make, something good to push a little bit.
And we have those freedoms to do that as an artist.
Sure. Photographs are great, but you can't always get a photograph exactly the way you want it. So you make changes and hopefully there are changes that improve the overall composition. Or in this case, I'm just trying to improve the value range and contrast in sort of the middle area.
And remember that 4 minutes really is truly a suggestion. So take your time, because
what is the actual
we
time?
actually have 9 more minutes.
Okay.
That we can be live here before we need to get ready for the next show. So, so take your time. Now, right now, what you're doing is basically you're drawing the strings by drawing the spaces in between them. Is that right?
Correct. I'm trying to very carefully not let my thick pencil marks touch each other. So I'm trying to create a little detail in here, I guess, with a negative shape. Or really, I'm treating the guitar strings, which are positive shape, as though they're a negative shape.
Now, Ashley's moving pretty quickly through the application of the values. And you can imagine if you laid out your drawing with this meticulous way he laid it out, which made it very accurate, and you took your time with the shading, just how accurate your drawing would be. So, even though he's working through the shading real quick, that doesn't mean that you have to work through the shading process quick.
No, it's that darn clock.
Yeah, but we are working against the clock here, and I think you get the idea here.
I'm trying to find some shorthand versions or ways to shade. So I'm still looking at shapes, honestly. Little triangles and rectangles of flat shapes, but hopefully they'll come together to feel a little bit like the busyness in this case of what's going on this portion of the guitar.
Yeah, you never have to tell the whole story in your drawing.
That's a good point.
Okay, Alana says, I keep getting requests for portraits, and I say no because I'm scared of them. They seem so hard. Advice for portraits? I work with pastels and colored pencils. Yeah, my advice to you would be, Ashley's working. I'll let you get your thoughts together.
Go ahead.
My advice to you would be to use some type of transfer process so that you get an accurate contour line drawing in place, especially if you're using pastels and colored pencils. You're going to be finishing the drawing with a different medium, and that's gonna be by far the bulk of your effort. And you won't have to worry about getting those contour lines as accurate as they need to be if you did a transfer, or if you use the grid technique, or something like that to make sure that you got what you needed in place on the surface. Would you add to that, or would you?
I was just going to say, make people look just slightly better than they really do. They like that, right? Just smooth out their wrinkles and add a little extra color to their hair. They want a portrait because they want to look better than they do in a photograph. Just a tip. And babies and children Just draw them exactly like they look. Everybody loves their children just exactly the way they look. You don't have to change a thing. So that's something I've noticed.
How do you find the proportions that are foreshortened without a reference? That's a really good question.
Well, you can foreshorten using linear perspective, and that'll create that'll manage the rate of change through space. That would be how I would do it if I was working without a reference or from imagination, possibly. We've got 20 seconds. What should I do?
It's a suggestion. We got about 5 more minutes, so
okay.
Take your time there because the drawing looks really fantastic, and the addition of the values is making a big difference. And I really like the sketchy nature of the shading that you're adding.
Well, thanks.
I think it adds to the drawing. It gives a feeling of movement, which you would expect this person to be moving since they're playing the guitar.
That's
anyway,
true.
so.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe you don't want such a quiet, slow application of material
it's working there
for this kind of subject. So I just want things to kind of fall apart and dissolve a little bit as we get farther out.
Also, Alana, I forgot to mention you're struggling with the portraits. I should mention that we have a course called Portrait Drawing the Smart Way at thevirtualinstructor.com, which is part of our membership program. And in that course, we go through drawing each one of the facial features, the planes of the face, the skull, obviously, drawing the face and the head from different angles. And we cover all of the individual parts of the face, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the hair, the ears, one at a time, and then put all that together in a drawing. So if you are a member, you might want to check that course out if you haven't already.
Okay. I just need to get a little bit of value out on the other side of the small hand and small arm, just so the light there starts to happen.
Yeah, just need a little bit of contrast there, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see. I believe that's a dark area. And I guess we're just about done with this one as a sketch goes. And I've got to tell you guys, I've been looking forward to drawing this one since I picked it out a few weeks ago. So I hope you've had a good experience if you're drawing along or if you continue drawing, and I might continue drawing, actually, on this one. I think I definitely could draw some more on it after we're done. So anyway, keep going on yours and practice those hands out there. Remember to start out with polygons and carve your fingers out of that broad shape just like a sculptor would.
I think it looks great.
All right,
Is there
thanks,
anything
Matt.
else you want to add before we...
You mean add verbally or
Verbally,
pictorially? Because I got a lot I'd like to
Verbally
add
and
pictorially,
pictorially.
but no, I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think we're good.
All right, well.
So it's a little more contrast right in the middle, and it disappears towards the edges. So I think that I achieved the goal that I had set for myself with this piece. And of course, my main goal here was to try to capture the proportions of the guitar compared to the hand, with the guitar being foreshortened the way it is, tipped out toward us in space.
Lots of people saying how much they like the drawing, how it looks great. Thank you guys for that.
This is the kind of drawing that no one ever usually sees, and my sketchbook is full of stuff like this. But I love seeing sort of works in progress by other artists. So thank you. Thanks for your comments and for sharing with me.
Well, I really like a lot of the looser lines, as I mentioned before, and it really has a feeling of movement. Like I mentioned, yeah.
I think it's a good idea to do timed drawings anyway, just for practice.
Definitely.
Just to kind of let yourself go and see what can happen here. So even if you're not doing Gettin Sketchy, it's not a bad idea to take a subject matter and draw it just for 10 minutes, and then start over and draw it for 20 minutes, and then start over and draw it for an hour. And you'll find yourself getting deeper into the drawing sooner that way. All right.
I guess we'll switch back out over here now. All right. Well, thanks everybody for sticking around for the last hour. If you did, Ashley did a fantastic job. His guitar and hands and torso look great. And I think I definitely think that you might have picked up a few things here and there. If you like this video, make sure that you give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, or if you just haven't done so yet, make sure you subscribe. It's absolutely free to do so. We cover a broad variety of drawing and painting mediums and subject matter here on this channel. And of course, it's free to subscribe here on YouTube. Again, there's links below. One is to our membership program. You can check it out. It's free for a week. And the second link is for free course videos and ebooks. You can check those out for free as well. That will put you on our mailing list, actually. And you'll be notified when we do Getting Sketchy here, which is every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we run these in seasons. I think tonight's episode was episode 6.
6,
maybe?
I believe, this
So we got
season.
4 more in this season before we take a little break, and then we'll start over again. We're going to get ready to head over to thevirtualinstructor.com right now, if you are watching this live, for our continuing live lesson series where I am drawing a lizard man with pen and ink. That's right.
So from the music man to the lizard man.
A lizard man. This is a composited image.
It's
that
a lot
I
of
put
fun, though. I got
together.
to tell you. I'm enjoying watching it develop.
So do you have anything else to add there, Ashley?
I don't think so. I'm going to draw a little bit between the 2 shows, I believe. And we'll see you back here next week at 6:30 Eastern Time.
All right. With that, we're going to go ahead and sign out for this evening. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Thanks for watching. And as always, I wish you all the very best in your artistic success. Good night, everybody.